Her laugh was soft, the kind that didn't ask for attention but still pulled every sound in the room toward it. I hadn't meant to stare, but something about the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear made it impossible to look away. There was nothing showy about her. It was the quiet composure, the kind that came from someone who had learned to carry herself through storms. We were alone in the studio, or at least it felt that way. The evening light stretched long across the wooden floor, catching dust and gold. She stood by the window, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. I remember thinking how the light seemed to pause for her, how her stillness filled the space more than noise ever could. "Can you hand me that?" she asked, her voice calm, low, the kind that made simple words sound like confessions. I passed her the folder, my fingers brushing hers for the briefest moment. It shouldn't have meant anything, but it did, a small spark that neither of us acknowledged. She glanced at me, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. Not flirtatious, not deliberate, just human. The kind that leaves you wondering if you imagined it. "You're quiet tonight," she said, her tone easy but her eyes searching. "I'm just listening," I managed. "To what?" I hesitated because the truth would have sounded foolish. "To you. To the rhythm of her movements, the way her presence filled the silences between us." Instead, I said, "To how the rain sounds against the glass." She turned back to the window, and for a moment, I thought she might say something more. Instead, she reached out and touched the frame, fingers tracing a faint crack in the wood. I watched the motion, slow, thoughtful, and felt the air between us shift. There's a kind of closeness that doesn't need words. Just the small space between two people who don't know what to do with what they're feeling. When she looked at me again, her gaze lingered longer than it should have. "You remind me of someone," she said softly. "Someone good, I hope." Her lips curved, just slightly. "Someone honest." That word hung there, honest, heavier than it should have. I wondered what she saw when she looked at me. Someone too young to understand her world? Or someone foolish enough to try? I don't know what made me step closer. Maybe it was the way her breath caught, or the faint tremor in her fingers as she set the folder down. Maybe I just wanted to know if the tension I felt was real. The room was quiet now, except for the faint patter of rain and the sound of her bracelets shifting as she moved. I could smell her perfume, faint, clean, familiar somehow. She turned slightly, and our shoulders almost touched. My heartbeat stumbled. "I should lock up soon," she said, but her voice didn't sound like someone eager to leave. "Do you want me to stay and help?" Her eyes met mine, steady, unreadable, and then drifted toward the door. For a heartbeat, it felt like she might say yes. But instead, she smiled, small, almost apologetic, and whispered, "You should go before it starts pouring." I nodded, pretending to listen, pretending I hadn't already memorized the way her voice sounded when she said my name. As I reached for the handle, the door opened from the other side. Someone stepped in, the sound of footsteps, the rush of cool air, and just like that, the moment folded shut. Still, when I looked back, her hand rested lightly against the desk, fingers tracing where mine had been. She didn't look up, but I knew she felt it too. Her touch said everything her words couldn't. She hadn't meant for it to happen, the late nights, the quiet laughter that came easier with each passing week. What started as a favor, helping her organize the art archives after hours, had turned into something neither of us named. She always wore the same silver ring, faintly scratched, spinning it absently when she thought no one noticed. I did. I noticed everything, the way she tucked her thumb under her chin when thinking, how her hair fell forward when she leaned over my shoulder to look at something. That night she looked tired. Not in the way a person looks after a long day, but the kind of tired that comes from years of holding everything together. "You ever feel like you're just maintaining?" she asked, her voice barely above the hum of the old ceiling fan. I shrugged. "Maybe. I think everyone does." She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You're young. You still think everything's fixable." It was meant as a tease, but something behind it stung, a hint of distance, of warning. She had been married once, I'd heard. No one said much, only that it ended quietly. I never asked? But sometimes, when her phone lit up with a name she didn't answer, or when she paused mid-sentence, as if remembering something she didn't want to, I felt the edges of her past press against the present. I tried not to look at her too long, not to let my gaze linger on the curve of her collarbone, or the way the lamplight softened the lines around her mouth. She noticed anyway. "Something on your mind?" she asked, turning to face me. I almost said it, "You," but instead I said, "Just tired." Her hand brushed my arm as she passed. Just a light touch, accidental maybe, but my pulse jumped anyway. "You should go home earlier," she said. "You spend too much time here." "You could fire me," I offered, smiling. She gave a quiet laugh, soft and reluctant. "Don't tempt me." For a moment, the air thickened. She was close, too close. I could feel the warmth from her skin, the faint trace of her perfume, the rise and fall of her breath. Her gaze flickered to my mouth before she stepped back, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear as though that single motion could erase what almost happened. "I shouldn't." She started, then stopped. I waited. She shook her head lightly. "Never mind." But she didn't move away entirely. Her hand rested on the table beside mine, fingers nearly touching. The small space between us felt fragile, electric. "I'm not going to pretend I don't notice," I said quietly. Her eyes lifted, steady but uncertain. "Notice what?" I smiled faintly. "You know." Something softened in her face then, not surrender, but recognition. She didn't deny it. She just looked at me for a long moment, as if memorizing the silence between us. And then, instead of words, she reached out, just long enough for her fingers to brush mine, and whispered, "You should go before I forget why this is wrong." But neither of us moved. The next evening, the storm had passed, but the air still felt heavy, like the world hadn't decided whether to calm down or start again. She was already there when I arrived, sleeves rolled up, hair loosely tied. The smell of rain clung to her. "I didn't think you'd come back tonight," she said without looking up. "You didn't tell me not to." A small smile tugged at her lips. "You don't always need permission." We worked side by side in silence, the kind that carried its own rhythm. Her shoulder brushed mine once, twice, and each time either of us moved away. There was a kind of comfort in pretending the touches meant nothing. Halfway through sorting the last box, her phone buzzed on the desk. The name flashing across the screen made her flinch. I pretended not to see. "You can answer," I said. She shook her head. "It's nothing." But the look that crossed her face said otherwise. Regret, maybe, or something unfinished. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It hummed. When she turned toward me, her eyes softened, as if the effort of holding back had worn her down. "People talk," she said quietly. "About us." Her pause was answer enough. "They'd say you're too young to know what you want." And they'd be right. "Would they?" I asked, stepping closer. Her breath hitched. "You shouldn't." "I'm not doing anything," I said, though my voice had dropped lower, steadier. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "That's the problem." Just then, the door creaked open, one of the staff from upstairs, calling her name. She stepped back so fast it hurt. I turned, pretending to be lost in the files, heart pounding so loud I was sure it gave me away. When the door finally shut again, the air between us pulsed with everything unspoken. She exhaled slowly. "That can't happen again." "What can't?" "This," she whispered. "Whatever this is." Her words were firm, but her hands betrayed her, fidgeting, restless. I caught her wrist without meaning to, gently, my thumb grazing the inside of her pulse. She didn't pull away immediately. "Tell me to stop," I said. She met my gaze, eyes sharp but trembling. "You think I can?" The world narrowed to the distance between us, inches, maybe less. I could feel her breath, uneven, warm against my skin. For a second, the thought of what might happen if I closed that distance was too loud to ignore. She leaned in just enough that her forehead brushed mine, The smallest touch, barely there, a collision of hesitation and want. The moment stretched, heartbeat to heartbeat, until she drew in a shaky breath and stepped back, her expression unreadable. "We're going to ruin something," she said softly. "Maybe," I whispered. "But I think it's already started." Neither of us moved again. The lights hummed overhead, the rain returned in a whisper against the window, and the space between us felt impossibly small, a line neither of us trusted ourselves to cross. The next few days blurred together, though either of us said why. She avoided lingering too long. I pretended not to notice when she did. But something had shifted, small, irreversible. Every glance carried what neither of us could say aloud. By Friday, the air in the archive felt different. Warmer. Quieter. She was sitting on the floor, folders spread around her, a loose strand of hair falling into her face. I crouched beside her to help, and when she looked up, our eyes met too soon, too close. "You've been quiet," she said softly. "So have you." Her lips parted, but no words followed. The silence stretched until it became something alive, breathing between us. I reached forward without thinking, brushing that single strand of hair away from her cheek. My hand hovered a moment too long, the warmth of her skin, the faint tremor in her breath. She didn't move. "You shouldn't do that," she murmured, though her voice had softened. "I know." "Then why?" "Because I can't help it." Something flickered in her eyes then, frustration, longing, fear, all tangled into one impossible look. She rose to her feet quickly, but I followed, the distance collapsing again. "You think this is simple," she said, her voice trembling despite her composure. "You think wanting something means you should have it." "No," I said quietly. "I think not wanting it doesn't make it go away." Her breath caught. "You don't understand what this would cost me." "Then explain it." She turned away, her hands tightening at her sides. "You'd walk away if you were smart." "Then stop looking at me like that." She froze. Slowly she turned, and I saw it then, the wall she'd been holding up, finally cracking. "You don't know what you're asking for," she whispered. "Then tell me." The words hung between us, raw and fragile. She stepped closer until I could feel the faint press of her shoulder against mine. Her perfume, clean, faintly citrus, filled the air. My pulse hammered as she lifted her eyes, uncertain but unflinching. "I'm too old to make mistakes like this," she said, her tone barely a breath. "Then maybe it's not a mistake." Her hand brushed my arm, a fleeting touch that felt deliberate this time. My skin burned where her fingers lingered. The world outside the small room felt far away, unreal. "Don't," she whispered again. But when I leaned in, she didn't move. Her breath met mine, uneven, close enough to feel the warmth of her lips without the kiss itself. Her eyes flicked shut for half a second, then opened, full of everything she wanted to say but couldn't. And then, a sharp knock on the door shattered the stillness. We jumped apart like strangers, hearts racing, eyes wide. She exhaled shakily, brushing her hands against her skirt. "You should go," she said, though her voice barely held together. I hesitated, then nodded. But as I turned, she caught my wrist, just for a second. Her voice was low, trembling, almost a confession. "Don't make me want this more than I already do." The next morning, everything felt off. The sun came through the windows too bright, the air too still. I told myself I wouldn't go, that space was the only way to make this easier. But by late afternoon, I found myself standing outside her door again, palms damp, heart uneasy. She looked surprised when she opened it. Not unkindly, just startled, like she hadn't expected the past to follow her home. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know," I replied. "But you didn't answer my message." Her eyes flickered, searching my face. "I didn't know what to say." The room behind her smelled faintly of coffee and rain. Papers scattered across the table, her jacket draped carelessly on a chair. "Lived in. Real." I hesitated before stepping in. "Did something happen?" She turned away, crossing her arms. "Someone saw us." Yesterday. They asked questions I didn't know how to answer. My stomach dropped. Who? It doesn't matter, she said quickly, though her tone betrayed her. Word travels fast here. People make their own stories. I could see her hands trembling, small, restrained movements she tried to hide. The thought of anyone judging her, twisting what we hadn't even let happen, made something hot rise in my chest. I'll fix it, I said. Her head snapped up. You can't fix this. That's what you don't understand. You still think this is something that can be controlled. I took a step closer. So what do we do? Pretend nothing happened? Pretend we don't what? She cut in, her voice shaking. Don't want this? Don't think about it every time we breathe the same air? The words hung in the air like lightning, sudden, dangerous, impossible to take back. She froze as soon as she said it, her hand flying to her mouth. I shouldn't have. But I was already closer, the space between us closing with a kind of gravity either of us could resist. Say it, I whispered. Her eyes met mine, wide and conflicted. You don't know what it's like, she said, her voice breaking. To finally want something you shouldn't. To be seen again after so long and hate yourself for it. I reached out, not to touch her, just to steady the air between us. Then hate me too, I said quietly. Her breath hitched, and for a moment she didn't move. Then she stepped forward, too close, brushing past me, her shoulder grazing mine as if by accident. But the tremor in her body gave her away. I can't keep doing this, she whispered. I can't keep pretending. Then don't. The words were barely sound, but they landed between us like a decision already made. She looked up, eyes glossy, raw. If I let this happen, she said, nothing stays the same. I nodded slowly. Maybe that's the point. The silence after that wasn't empty, it was full. Full of everything about to come undone. The night felt heavier than usual, the kind of quiet that made every breath sound louder than it should. She had called me back to the studio, said there were things left unsaid. When I arrived, the lights were low, a single lamp glowing over the desk. She stood there, hands braced against the table, shoulders tense. You shouldn't have come, she said. You asked me to. She sighed, turning toward me. That was a mistake. Then why do you look like you've been waiting? Her jaw tightened. You think everything's about you. It's not, I said softly. But this is. That silenced her. The rain began again outside, a soft percussion against the windows. I stepped closer, not touching, just close enough to see the rise and fall of her breath. I can't do this anymore, she said. I can't keep pretending we don't know where this is going. Then stop pretending. She looked up sharply. You think it's that simple? I've built a life around being careful. And you… She broke off, shaking her head. You make it impossible to breathe. Her voice cracked on that last word. I reached for her hand, tentative at first, until she didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly in mine. Tell me to leave, I whispered. She didn't answer. Her eyes searched my face, every line, every hesitation, like she was trying to memorize something she knew she shouldn't want to keep. Say it, I said again. Instead, she took a slow step forward, closing the distance between us. The air thickened. Her perfume was faint, like citrus and rain, and I could feel the heat from her skin. Her hand came up, not to pull me closer, but to rest lightly against my chest, her fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt. I could feel her pulse through her fingertips. This isn't right, she breathed. I know. She tilted her head up just enough that our foreheads nearly touched. The world shrank to the sound of rain, to the whisper of her breath brushing against my lips. I've tried to stay away, she said, voice trembling. But every time you walk into a room, I forget how to. I exhaled shakily, my hands sliding to the small of her back, not pulling, just resting there, waiting. Then stop trying. Her eyes closed for a second, her lips parting like she was about to speak, or maybe something else. When she opened them again, there was no fear left, only truth. If we do this, she whispered, there's no going back. I swallowed hard. Then don't look back. For one breathless heartbeat, everything stopped. Her hand on my chest, my thumb brushing the edge of her wrist, the air charged with everything we'd been holding in. And just as she leaned in, a hair's width between yes and no, the studio door creaked open behind us. We froze. She stepped back first, eyes wide, breath unsteady. But as the footsteps faded, she looked at me again, this time without walls, without denial. Whatever happened next, we both understood. The choice had already been made. Morning light spilled through the curtains, soft and forgiving. The world outside had moved on, but in that quiet space between heartbeats, it felt like time was still catching up to what had happened. She sat by the window, hair loose, tracing the rim of her coffee cup without drinking from it. I watched her in silence, memorizing the small things, the curve of her wrist, the way her eyes followed the light instead of me. I thought it would feel different, she said finally. How does it feel? Real, she murmured. And that's what scares me. I crossed the room slowly, stopping behind her chair. We don't have to rush anything, I said. We just have to not run from it. She turned then, her gaze finding mine. There was still hesitation there, but the distance between us, all those unspoken fears and what-ifs, had softened. I spent so long convincing myself I didn't need anyone, she said. That needing someone meant weakness. And then you came along and ruined that. I smiled faintly. You make it sound like a bad thing. She laughed, quiet, almost shy, and it was the kind of sound that made every sleepless night worth it. When I reached for her hand, she didn't pull away this time. Her fingers slipped into mine like they'd been waiting for the chance. I don't know where this goes, she admitted. We're not exactly simple. Good, I said softly. Simple was never the point. She looked down at our hands, then back up at me. There was something new in her eyes, not the guarded woman I'd first met, but someone finally allowing herself to feel seen. You're too young to know what you want, she teased gently. I leaned in closer, until my forehead brushed hers. Then let me spend a lifetime figuring it out. She breathed out a laugh, the kind that trembles between disbelief and surrender. Then, slowly, she rested her head against my chest. I wrapped my arms around her, and the world, the rumors, the doubts, the noise, all faded into the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. We stayed like that for a long while, no need for words. Just quiet acceptance, the kind that only comes when both people stop fighting what's already true. When she finally looked up, her expression was soft, certain. You know this won't be easy. I don't need easy, I said. Just honest. Her smile then, small, real, unguarded, felt like the beginning of something neither of us had dared to hope for. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled like renewal. And for the first time, either of us looked away. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?